A very warm welcome and kia ora to everyone in FSC Connect land. It is Tuesday, the 28th of September, and delighted to welcome everyone. This is Mental Health Awareness Week, and our conversation today is focused on financial advice and financial advisors after what's been a pretty trying couple of years of lockdowns, regulatory change, and lots of curveballs thrown at all of us, and with a fantastic panel of people from around the sector, both here in New Zealand and across the ditch in Australia. So really up for a really interesting discussion. Like all of our FSC Connect folks, it is very much interactive. It would be lovely to have this conversation in a room with a cup of coffee where we could all kind of see each other, but we'll have to deal with the Zoom environment instead. But it's that kind of conversation because it's facing into how's the financial advice community coped. Some thrive, some done it tough over the last couple of years, but looking through financial advisors to their clients and the key role that advisors play, leading and guiding clients through good times and tough times, and so forth. So that's kind of the conversation. It is Zoom, so you can feel free to ask Q&As, you can feel free to post comments. The panel will try and grab hold of those as we go through. And like I say, as interactive as possible. As with all of our sessions, they are on the record. And so we will be recording this and it will be available post this session for a bit of a discussion. And so with that, a very warm kia ora and welcome. We might just go to the slide that showcases who's actually in this discussion. And rather than me introducing all of our excellent panelists, Sam and Nicola, Clarissa, Andrew and Katrina, I'm actually going to invite them to introduce themselves and perhaps for a first question, not only introduce yourself, but tell us what your take on this topic is. What's your take on how financial advisors and have kind of dealt with the last couple of years, particularly in the context of Mental Health Awareness Week? So welcome. And Nicola, I'm going to hand the call to you first, if I can.
Hi, I'm Nicola Smee. I'm from My Solutions. I'm one of the directors there, and I also have a GM role. So I'm sort of experiencing all sides of what lockdown means for us, for our team, for advisors. For those of you that know me, I've actually got 3 internal members of my family that are actually practicing advisors. I have a dad and mum that were financial advisors, an uncle that's a financial advisor. So I really do get to hear a lot of stuff on what's happening at ground zero, and I hear the ups and downs, and I'm really excited. I'm very passionate about mental health actually. In the last few weeks, I've been having regular Zoom meetings with my administration team. And it was really funny. The first few weeks, we struggled with getting the cameras to work and the sound to work, and people were nervous because their hair was going grey. So I said to them in the end, hey, we're all going grey, we're all getting old. I've run out of my anti-wrinkle cream. But we've gone out of our way to actually support and be there for each other. And now when we say, are you okay? How are you doing? It's not just how you're coping with your workload, but it's more about how are you feeling today? How are you coping with everything? And I really am pleased to say, I really do feel that we've all moved to another level, a deeper connection with our teams that we actually didn't have before. So I actually think there's a lot to celebrate with these lockdowns. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about how you maybe react emotionally to situations. And it's been good to sort of step back, learn to breathe, learn to sort of say, right, I've done enough now. I need to shut my computer and go for a walk. I need to take my lunch breaks. I need to sleep well. I need to cut down on the alcohol. But I must say, I have been rewarding myself in the evenings with the odd glass of wine because I think it's quite therapeutic, actually. So yes, my take on mental health is you actually have to find that joy and that fullness in yourself before you can actually help others, because you can't be any support to your family, you can't be support for your clients or your team if you're not actually in a good spot. So more than ever, we're all leaders and we have to actually look after ourselves first. And I know that sometimes sounds a little bit selfish, but I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks actually making sure that I'm feeling okay, that I'm happy, that I'm eating well, and I'm just in a good space. And I think too, when you are in a good space, your lens actually becomes in a good space and you start viewing the whole world in a better light. So yeah,
that's awesome. Nicola, that's absolutely awesome. I'm going to come back to a couple of those points you raised, particularly interested in how we all reward ourselves with the little and the big things after several weeks if you're in Auckland in lockdown. If you're outside of Auckland, then happy days, your world is a lot freer. But I might go, Sam, to you next if I can.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. And look, thank you for stating the date and day in your introduction. I think one of the things with lockdown is it feels like Groundhog Day for me. You could have told me it was Thursday and I would have believed you. It does get very repetitious. For me personally, it feels like it's Zoom call to Zoom call, not leaving the back shed where I've repurposed to be an office. But look, my interest around this topic is selfishly, working with AIA, we've got the ambition of having New Zealand as the healthiest and most protected nation. And to achieve that, we need a healthy and thriving advisor community. So for us, it's really around, coming back to Nicola's point, which is how do we look after the advisors first in respect to their mental health and their mental well-being, because it's actually going to have huge impacts on outcomes for clients. This is a societal issue. This is not just an advice issue. 1 in 4 New Zealanders will suffer from some form of mental health in any year. They estimate that it costs the New Zealand economy $12 billion in lost revenue through presenteeism, absenteeism, and just low productivity. So it's something that we have to face into. It's something that we have to work towards. It's a personal journey, but I think the important thing is actually the acknowledgement of it, and sessions like this and some of the things that we're doing both at AIA but also just at the industry level, I think are really important to have those discussions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. Again, I'll pick up some of the themes that you've touched on. Katrina, kia ora and welcome.
Thank you. Welcome to everyone, and great to see everyone on the panel and also those that are listening in today. Mental wellbeing for me is something that, as a practicing advisor, 22 years, I've got a humongous number of clients that I support and take care of, as well as my team. And what I've really learned is you cannot be there for those people unless you're actually taking care of yourself as well. So very much when I look at the topic of mental wellbeing, it's not how do I cope, it's how do I thrive? And how do I help my team thrive? And how do I help my clients thrive? So like you mentioned, on any given day, Sam, we will get calls from clients that are obviously in a tough position. And in order to be there for them, we've got to stay strong. We've got to stay healthy. About 6 years ago, I probably hit rock bottom for my own wellbeing. I had been supporting about 25 different clients in a very short period of time with very significant claims. And I got to the end of that and we'd done some amazing work. We'd had claims overturned. We'd been a rock for these people. But I personally felt absolutely exhausted and empty and numb. And I didn't quite know where I could get my soul topped up again. And so I had been introduced to MDRT, an international organisation, and introduced to the whole concept of the whole person concept. How do you thrive in all areas of your life, whether that's family relationships, friendships, health, physical, spiritual, intellectual, and how do you keep developing it? So when I look at mental wellbeing and wellbeing in particular around advisors, that's very much where I come from. How do we work from that level, work from that space, and be the best that we can be, so that we can obviously be there with our souls topped up when we're dealing with our clients.
That's great, thanks, Katrina. And yeah, similarly, the role that advisors play, particularly in tough times, and COVID's been pretty tough. So, really strong messages from all three of you of the panelists so far. But I'm going to go to Andrew next, down at Balmoral Beach in Sydney, I think, Andrew.
It's true, I am at Balmoral Beach in Sydney, but I feel I need to say this every time I'm in New Zealand. I was born in Papakura. My family are all in New Zealand, and until very recently, I was a very regular visitor. And if not for COVID, I would be there this week for a funeral of my uncle, who unfortunately found the stress of COVID too much to bear. So this is something which is really real to me. I've had a small number of friends who've made that decision in the past couple of years, so that's quite challenging. It's really real for advisors too, because advisors sit in a kind of special position in the world. For their clients, they're kind of pilot, coach, navigator, counselor, and take on all the heavy lifting for that. For their company, they're often the leader and the boss. For their family, they're also the leader, the lover, the partner, and all those things. And when we face what we're facing now, which is a series of exogenous threats, which are things that we can't control, then stress occurs at every single level there. And finding a way to cope with that and manage it is really, really important. The spectrum of mental health is far too broad to mention without exception. The way to deal with that too is often individual, but it's critical that that advisors go through those processes. Like everybody else here, I've got a team of 100 odd people around the world. We've put in a series of processes for external assistance for people who are finding the stress. And I was surprised at the number of people who took that up, but I was glad that we're able to provide it. And we've changed the way we're working, like Nicola. We have regular catch-ups. Unfortunately, Nicola, we play regular drinking games as a company. And I think that's important to allow us to do that, although my booze budget has gone through the roof in COVID. I did notice that we'd spent $3,500 on scotch recently, and I thought, well, that's not a bad thing. So those things are important. How we emerge from this is going to be really important to see. There's quite a lot of research around this, and Sam probably knows more about this than the rest of us, but if we can cope from this, people tend to be stronger than they were in the past, and making sure that we provide systems to allow people to be stronger and allow them to understand the systems of resilience and be able to, as everybody has said, pass that on to their clients. It's going to be really important. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a researcher, and I've been doing that for the past 20 years, but I have never seen the industry, for want of a better word, as choppy as we're seeing it now. And that's globally. So the pressure is there. So back to you, Richard.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think just a couple of points. Very sad to hear your news. Having attended 3 digital funerals or Zoom funerals in the last 18 months, that was never something I thought would ever happen. And, if life's about celebrating life's moments and being there for friends and family when things are really tough, I think we've all had various examples of that over the last 18 months. The other point you raise, just for clarity's sake, none of us work in the professional mental health field. We did have an excellent session a few weeks back with people who do. So this is more a conversation around those of us in the sector with a particular focus on financial advice, rather than a professional session with people who professionally work in the sector. So that's probably a caveat, but I think it's also just so we don't have the pressure to try and answer the questions that professionals would otherwise do. On our last panelist is Clarissa Hirst. So, Riss, welcome, and tell us your take on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and lovely to be here. I'm Clarissa Hirst, and I head up the consumer communications at the FSC, as well as our research framework. I don't have as many financial advisors in my family as Nicola does, but my late father was a financial advisor. So I guess for me, I see financial advisors as really just being there to help others. And I think to everyone else's point, so many of you made it, you know, how can advisors, people who are, you know, their job is all about helping people who are, you know, perhaps struggling in certain situations, when they're struggling themselves. I think it's one of those things that, yeah, you really need to put your own life jacket on before putting on other people's, and it's really hard to do, especially at a time like this. For me, I think mental health is not so much about being 100% happy and okay all of the time, but effectively having those tools to manage and to cope when you do experience those tougher times. And yeah, I've definitely had several of those during my life, and one of the worst of those was probably last year during the pandemic. But yeah, I guess I'm hoping today to just be able to put some of this conversation into a broader context of some of the research that we've done here at the FSC. So including some that we did earlier this year with financial advisors around some of the challenges that they were facing, not just with the pandemic, but with regulatory change and so on, and our Financial Resilience Index research, which tracks the financial wellbeing and security and preparedness of Kiwis. So yeah, just hoping to bring a little bit of context to the chat today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Riss, and thank you, everyone. That's a really nice intro. I think first topic we're going to try and grab hold of is, and Katrina, if I can start with you on this one. So we might start narrow and then kind of bring it out to what's happening globally. Katrina, you obviously are a practitioner, you run a business, you have you serve a lot of clients. Kind of tell us how's the last couple of years been for your practice, the people in your business and your clients. What's kind of been the experience that's come through, and have you dealt with it?
2 years ago, I made the choice that we would actually start working towards being completely paperless, dealing with clients more so from a Zoom and a phone point of view. So we did this prior to the actual pandemic, and that actually meant that we were a lot more prepared when we went into the first lockdowns. Our team had already sort of started using a lot of the e-apps. They'd already started having connections with people where they could develop relationships in this format. Over that, fast forward a couple 18 months, I was probably doing 11 to 12 face-to-face, running around Auckland, seeing people. I'm now probably seeing 7 to 9 people a day in this format or on the phone. And probably the biggest thing I would say that it's huge amounts of intensity. This form of communication can be really beneficial to work with clients. You can get people to make smart, strong, good decisions using this format, but it takes a lot of energy. And I never knew what Zoom fatigue was. I never knew what lockdown fatigue was, but I certainly think we've all sort of experienced it and certainly have appreciated that we've needed to do things around that. The pace of change. So regardless of the pandemic, with regulatory change and so forth, the pace is just huge. We've got people having to learn new ways of doing things. We've got clients learning new ways of doing things. It's actually a lot of fun watching a couple in their 60s actually get on Zoom for the first time. They feel fantastic. They love it, but it does take, it is different. With that comes a huge amount of work. The volume of work has increased. Because of regulation, we obviously have to do a lot more than what we did before. The complexities have increased. So we need to make sure that we are well and that we're taking good breaks and that we're taking holidays. I don't think I've actually been on a plane as much as I used to, like everybody else. And I have to say that that's been a real challenge, not actually having proper holidays like I used to. And that's something we've got to look forward to more in the future. There's an increasing amount of mentoring required within my team. Helping them through all these changes. So that takes, and so I found myself as a leader actually having to really be conscious of my impact on other people a lot more than what I probably was beforehand. And that's not been a bad thing. I do think advisors have had to relook at their models as well, their business models, to how they actually function. So, I mean, if you haven't transferred through to this form of communication, then you may be struggling a lot more than what you need to. And some people adopt change a lot better than others. And if you're really stuck, I really would urge people to sort of really adopt this way for your own mental well-being, if anything else. It's a good experience.
Just picking up the client lens, you know, has the last couple of years been really tough for your clients? Are there any examples where people have really struggled? Or on the flip on that, are there any examples where actually it's been fantastic and you provided heaps of support and advice?
I think the first lockdown, certainly there was a lot of fear. People didn't realise where it was going to end and how it was going to look. And so there was this frenetic and, you know, incoming calls, incoming emails, connecting with people. We had to calm them down a great deal because we didn't all know where it would go. This lockdown, I have to say, it certainly isn't like that. It's more of a case of we know that there's an end date. We don't know what the date is. And a lot of people are just getting on with it. We've certainly seen people hit the wall. We've certainly seen people suffer a lot more mental illnesses themselves, and stress and anxiety, and so therefore we see a bit more aggression at times. We've had to deal with that and actually support them and help them. And I try to sort of remind my team as well is that it's not about them, it's actually about how that person's feeling. So it's really important for us to actually be able to connect and get them to sort of not take that on board and help those clients. Anyone that has been in an industry that's been affected by COVID, whether it be hospitality, tourism, maybe small businesses, they have struggled. And if they haven't been able to move forward, then that's been a challenge. But here's the thing. We've still had people getting cancer. We've still had people having heart attacks. We've still had all the things that we were dealing with before. And it's now a little bit more complex to getting access to things and getting things done in those areas. And I don't see that changing. I think it's going to be an ever increasing world of us having to get people to keeping covers, getting people to adjust to seeing specialists and you know, medical treatment outside of the public system, because I think that's going to be more challenging.
Great. Thanks, Katrina. Sam, I might go to you on this one. If Katrina's example is what's happening in her business, you see a lot of businesses, and of course AA operates in many places and recently did the Aussie Advisor mental health research. What's your sense of what's happening in advisor practices and then clients?
Yeah, look, let me talk about New Zealand first, Richard, and I think, you know, Katrina did a great job in sharing her story, and I think it's pretty consistent with the industry. There are definitely some advisors that have been able to, you know, move with things and build a business and thrive. There's a number of advisors, though, that are struggling, and I think, you know, this is not to dwell on that, but, you know, it is coming back to what Andrew said, is people not being able to control some things, you know, things that are in their control versus out of their control, and grappling with stuff that's out of their control. There is no end date to COVID, and you know, there's challenges on business. Katrina, you know, put it eloquently around the challenges just around servicing existing clients. You know, the normal problems haven't disappeared. Plus, you've then got business impacts, you know, around COVID from more of an international view and from an Australian perspective. You know, AA Australia did do some research, which we already kicked off here, and we can talk about that in due course. But that looked at advisor wellbeing at a time which was very early days in COVID. It was really around the regulatory change that was enforced on the Australian advisor community and the general health of that advisor community. And I've got to admit, it was pretty dire. In fact, it's fair to say it was very dire. You know, 73% of the respondents had suffered, you know, some form of burnout from stress, and that stress was really about things they couldn't control. So changes in the advice processes, changes in commission levels, changes in the way that they needed to service their clients. They felt out of control, and that's what was really the main driver of that burnout. 67% had acknowledged that they'd experienced some level of depression. Now, that was either, you know, depressed all of the time or some of the time, but that's a very large portion of the advisor community. And 61% acknowledged that they had poor sleep due to stress. And these are all, you know, huge numbers when you consider that across the industry. And, Andrew, pointed out, the suicide rate within the Australian advice community was about 7 times more than the general population at this time. This was because people weren't, dealing with the stresses that they were on. The key takeout for me on that is, these are horrible numbers, but the thing that, was really alarming is that 42% of those surveyed said that they were going to leave the profession, and a further 17 were considering leaving the profession. So if you do the sums, that's 60% of people that were either going to or thinking about leaving the profession. Even in sales terms, you take a quarter of that to be the real number. That's 15% of the advisor community that are leaving. Now that has a huge impact on society. We know that people that get advice are much better off. And for 15% of the advisor community, 60% suggesting that they were going to leave, I'm rounding it down using the rule of a quarter. If 15% of the advisor community leaves, that's not a great outcome for the Australian community. And, I think there's been, this is why we want to do the research here. I'm confident that our situation is not like the Australian situation, but I don't think that, I don't think we're in great shape. I think we've got some work to do. There are a number of pressures. There's the regulatory change, there's licensing change, there's consumer demand changes. There are people that, consumers expect more from us as advisors and us as manufacturers, on top of COVID, where we don't really know what's going on top of huge household debt levels, economic uncertainty, global and geopolitical uncertainty. This is all sort of building up and pressures of, stuff we can't control. And I think that's, my concern for the industry personally.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I mean, you raise a lot of confronting issues there. And I suppose that's the thing, right? Like in many ways, we got to be real and authentic, because there is stuff out there, and it's in the end how you deal with it and make decisions on it. But we're willing it to go away or wishing it's not there kind of really isn't the answer. Nicola, I might go to you on that one. You and I were talking a little earlier in the week, and to Sam's point, within your role, you kind of see people doing the thrive, but you also see people doing it pretty tough. What's kind of been your experience, both in the advice community, within Solutions, but also within the clients that you folks look after?
Well, I think I said to you, for some people, it is like being in a pressure cooker. You've got so many things firing at you in so many different angles. And as I sort of mentioned the other day to you, a lot of them have been really, really good advisors for many, many years, and they're passionate about looking after their clients and doing the right thing and making sure that the policies that they're giving to the clients are actually delivering at time of need. And now you've got these passionate financial advisors who are real people pleasers, and they want to do what's right for their clients. They're now having to be like academics, or, as I said to you, the best example I can give you is like a story where you've got a wonderful person that has been driving a car very successfully for many years, and now they're being told to be the high-performing mechanic, and they have to open the bonnet of their car. They have to pull the whole motor apart and put the motor back together, making sure every nut and bolt is in the right place, whilst being watched and monitored and being assessed to make sure everything is in the right spot. And if they get it wrong, they're going to be possibly fined, publicly shamed, or lose their business. So they're absolutely freaked out. And the word anxiety is coming up, as Sam said, 1 in 4 suffers from depression. I think it's almost 50% of advisors I talk to are feeling really anxious at the moment, and anxiety is a form of mental health issues. And you ask them sometimes, how are you going with your getting ready to apply for your FAP license and stuff, and they just look at you, and it is literally like a possum with headlights on them. They're so overwhelmed and not sure which direction they should go. And when they think that they are going in the right direction, they need that constant reassurance and that support. And that's why, regardless of what group you're in or who you go to for your reassurance and support, they do need to actually have that person or people that they can go to and say, hey, am I on the right track? Am I heading in the right direction? I was talking to my daughter the other day, who is a financial advisor, and she said, you know what, Mum, if you guys weren't in the industry and I couldn't just pick up the phone and chat to you when I've got a claim that's gone to custard, or I can't get a policy through, or can't get the client, can't have bloods at the moment, can't get the doctor's reports through. I'm struggling to actually do an online presentation with someone who's never used Zoom before and trying to go through a 30-page report, get their signatures in the right spot. She said, if I didn't have your support, I would have left the industry. And I was sort of quite shocked by that, because I actually think she's got it all together and she's a really bright girl with a commerce degree and stuff. But she's been struggling. She's doing a level 5. She's done most of her papers. The last one she's got left to do, which she's doing at the moment, is her investment strand. And what she's done is she's buddied up with a few other people who are doing the same course as her, so that they can support each other and just go, hey, do you think I'm on track with this? And that's what I think we need to see more and more of in this industry, as advisors budding up with other advisors and saying, hey, let's do this together. And that reassurance and that support, it just makes the load so much easier to bear. And it's just that form of, like, you know, how Sir Mason Durry talked about the meeting house and how important to have 4 equal sides of a building to give you stability when it comes to mental health. You've got your spiritual well-being, your physical, your mental, emotional well-being, your family, social well-being, and the foundation of your meeting house or your house is always the roots. It's the foundations, it's the connections, it's that sense of I belong, I am welcomed, I am loved, I am supported. And that gives you the stability you need in this industry and the resilience to help cope with change. When you've got someone you can pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm having this issue getting this underwriting done. Do you think I should handle it a different way, or who should I talk to? And just knowing that there's someone there that will support you is priceless. So if you don't have someone out there in the industry and you're listening as a financial advisor, you must know someone that you have met at previous conferences or met at little industry workshops and think, hey, I get on with that guy or I get on with that woman. I'm going to give them a call and see how they're coping, because maybe we could work together on our FAP licensing stuff. And you do the cybersecurity policy. I'll help you with the outsourcing matrix, and let's just do it together so we can get on the line, over the line, and both win, you know.
Thanks, Nicola. And Katrina, you're nodding. I mean, that's a really powerful part of the advice community, isn't it? That kind of connecting and sharing. Yeah.
I've never experienced until I joined MDRT actually how much value you can get from speaking to other advisors who are like-minded. Their focus is always to try and do the best that they can for their clients. They want to grow fantastic businesses. They all want to have healthy relationships with their families and their children and their friends. And they're all around the world. So we have this incredible network around the world, but we also have this incredible network within New Zealand. But I don't think it's as strong as it used to be. I think because of the changes within the dealer group world, it's gone from being a family environment, potentially in a lot of cases, to being more of a licensing relationship. There is certainly more of a monitoring relationship going on. So it's a bit of a challenge for people to feel that connectedness, the ability to pick those phones up and have those conversations. But that's the best way of doing things. Share the load. Don't carry it all yourself. If you are struggling with something, the first thing is to acknowledge it. I'm struggling with this case, or I'm struggling with this particular client. Call someone, ask them how they dealt with it. Share that load, and you will be stronger for it, because you'll probably realize that you actually had the answers yourself, but you just needed to work through it. And you talked before, Nicola, about anxiety. I'd listened to an amazing speaker, Sarah, who does Take a Breath, who was at the Vitality. We had a Vitality Day a few weeks and months ago, and Sarah was amazing just to actually help you. All the speakers were actually, but it was very much around taking that anxiety and doing something with it rather than let it feed you. We have the ability, anxiety is about a physiological response to stress. We've got to learn how to manage that stress, take a breath, learn how to breathe again, learn how to communicate with people, ask for help, and that really makes a big difference. I'd like to see people actually, in the organisations I've belonged to, they call them study groups. But in fact, what it often is 4 or 5 practitioners around the world or anywhere around New Zealand that have no other connection with, but they get together once a month for an hour. And they talk about a challenge that they've had in their business that week or that month, and how they all collectively could solve that problem. It is so empowering because you can offer so much value to other people, but in turn you can get outside yourself and actually get others to help you. Stuff you learn is awesome. And I'd love to see that happen a lot more within our community within New Zealand, very much so.
That's awesome. Thanks, Katrina. I'm going to push on to, if we started very organically, I'm going to just lift us to some of the research findings on this topic around the value that advisors create and some of the global experience. Riss, I might go to you on this because the research that the FSC did at the end of last year with New Zealand advisors was very much about tapping into some of these issues. What were some of the key findings that came out?
Yeah, I think, Andrew can certainly speak to the global perspective, but from a New Zealand perspective, we found that New Zealanders who received advice were better off. They had better wellbeing overall, and the advisors that we surveyed as well agreed that that the work that they were doing was having an impact on their clients. So it was that two-way agreement there. We released research in February this year, which looked at the professional advice sector and sort of how they'd been coping. They had a lot to deal with in 2020. There was the pandemic. They were, getting prepared for the FSC transition, all those kind of regulatory changes that were happening. And those challenges are still ongoing, as we know. So what we found was that confidence overall did drop. So before COVID, 84.5% of the advisors we surveyed felt confident as a professional in the New Zealand financial services industry. Later on, or I don't want to say after COVID because we're still enduring it, but that dropped to 69%. So that's about a 15% drop, which doesn't seem overwhelming, but it is quite significant. 42% of advisors felt that business conditions had worsened as a result of COVID. And then there were some interesting findings with regards to how advisors were feeling about the regulatory environment. So the impact of regulatory changes seemed to have quite a significant impact on their stress levels, their overall wellbeing and their mental health. So we saw that 35.5% felt that regulatory changes had adversely impacted their mental health. 43.5% felt that the impact of regulatory change had adversely impacted their overall wellbeing. And 63.5% felt that the impact of regulatory changes had increased their overall stress levels. So, we can definitely see that there are some recurring themes there based on what the other panelists have spoken to already, based on more of the anecdotal side of things. And I think when we put this into a slightly broader context, we also released our Financial Resilience Index, which is, it tracks these 5 key indicators, kind of sees how Kiwis are feeling about certain things. And we kind of can compare the findings from pre-pandemic to during pandemic to now. And, it's quite significant that 62% of Kiwis in general are worrying about money daily, weekly or monthly. And that jumps up to 77% for those who are aged 37 and under. So, I guess from the research we've done, Kiwis, all Kiwis are struggling. This is hard for everybody in some way or another. But financial advisors, have all these other factors at play as well, and other challenges to deal with, clearly. So yeah, I think that's sort of how it fits into the New Zealand context. And Andrew, I think, could probably speak to the global perspective. But I'd certainly be interested in seeing the results of AIA's survey of Kiwi advisors as well, just to see how that compares to the data we collected earlier this year. So
thanks, Rhys. That's awesome. And I will go to Andrew. I mean, it feels to me, because we're operating at multiple levels here, it's not only what's going on within the advice community and how we're coping, they coping, we as a sector are coping, but because we play such an important role in bringing people, customers, consumers through in their times of need and so on, there's a serving requirement there as well. And I think, back to Nicola and Katrina's point, you've got to be in good stead to be able to do that. You got to put on your suit, if you will, your advisor's suit in tough times and go forth and help your clients. And you can only do that if you've helped yourself first, I think was the message. Andrew, your comments on all of what we've discussed, but also kind of with that more global lens, what's your sense of what's going on? And you're on mute.
And I'd like to start by taking myself off mute, even though I did a good little Muppet show there for a second. I'm sorry about that. One of the things that I want everyone to understand, that one of the primary roles of an advisor and one of the most important things that they do, and I've been researching this for 20 years, is they take their customers from chaos into order. So people enter an advisor's office 9 times out of 10 in absolute chaos, and they leave in order or on the journey to order, and then the journey from order to understanding, and then from understanding for confidence, and then they have much better outcomes. They tend to be richer. We think that the advisor's uplift is about 3% compounding per year, which is not super interesting in year 1, but it's really interesting in year 15. We know that they have better insurances. We know that they have more overseas holidays. We know that they educate their children privately or privately by choice. We know that if there's calamity in their lives, that they face into it better. So they're more confident, they're wealthier, and they have a lot more control over their outcomes. They're literally passing that stress to the advisor. If the advisor is not only taking on the client stress, but also the economic stress and the kind of zeitgeist stress, then that becomes a really big problem. How they deal with that is something that we've all discussed. And there's a couple of ways to think about this. One of the ways to think about this is to embrace the kind of Roman idea of Stoicism and say, well, this is what it is, right? We're just going to do the best thing we can here, and we can spend as much time as we like reading the writings of Marcus Aurelius and Tacitus and Epictetus and all those guys who are writing about this a long time ago. It's worth noting too that Athens didn't fall in battle; it fell to a plague. And the other thing that's kind of worth noting is that the last kind of great plague that we had, or we've had several great plagues in the world. We had one in 1665, then one in 1919. And one of the ones we're talking about is the one in 1665, which is the Great Plague of London. And what happened then? I mean, a bunch of really interesting things happened then. Isaac Newton wrote the Principia Mathematica, so he went home to the country, to Folkestone, and wrote that. Shakespeare went back to Stratford and Avon, and then he came out with King Lear. It's worth thinking about how we make the best of this for ourselves and also for our clients, and actually use this as a transformative experience. So this is going to be transformative. Certainly that's what's happened in the UK. Not so much the USA, but absolutely the UK. They've really focused in on process and letting the process do the heavy lifting of the business, and then really focusing on platforms and allowing the platforms to do the heavy lifting of the business. So they face, like we're facing in Australia and like you're starting to face in New Zealand, the regulator saying, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And they use process and platform to take that work away, so that they made all those things visible. Stuff that used to be manual is now practical. And the next thing they focused in is on the team. And my sense is that's what's happening in your market as well. So all those things are occurring. As we go on through this, I'm in week 11 of lockdown in Sydney. That's kind of entertaining. But as we were talking about beforehand, I'm in a gilded cage, and I've used that to lose 17 kilos and also to reform part of my business and make the changes that I wanted to make that I've been putting off for a long time. But it's hard. It's really hard facing into client needs. It's really hard facing into staff needs. It's really hard facing into those things. But I take a lot of strength from what I've watched the guys in the UK do. The next thing that's going to happen is what's really happening in America now, not so much in Western Europe and the UK, is, for want of a better description, the orgy of spending. Every time that we get suppressed demand, and I know the Australian figures really well, there's about $112 billion of suppressed demand in Australia, which has been building up inside the financial services system. And it's mostly coming out as house purchases and online purchases. Then we get this kind of big wave of spending that happens after it. One of the things that I think is going to be successful, and I'm going to try and measure it, is how much of that we manage to put into people's savings and not turn into smart TVs. Though that said, I was looking at smart televisions today myself. My television's 9 years old. I think it's about time that I replace it. But so that we do that. So we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity in this time as we emerge from COVID to help guide people to make better decisions. There will be a need to travel. Trust me, like Katrina, I haven't been on a plane for a long time, and I was loving that at the start, but I've had enough now. I'd really like to go somewhere else apart from Balmoral Beach. So how we navigate through that's going to be really important. So there's a couple of clues. The first clue is in the UK, where they face the same problems that we're all facing up post RDR, post the economic stresses, et cetera, and they reform themselves, mostly working with industry players to build the platforms, processes, and relationships. That's going to put pressure on people like Sam, because the data that we have from Australia shows that advisors are more and more leaning on the manufacturers of product to help them navigate through the process. And the work that he's doing with AI Vitality and the work is part of that kind of tapestry. So that's going to come. Those processes are incredibly important. Every bit of research we're doing globally now shows that advisors are absolutely focused on what I call reducing the work in their business and taking out the manual processes and turning them to operational processes. And Katrina is some way down that line. She's doing Zoom meetings, she's doing that sort of thing. And that's the stuff which we're watching great businesses do. And that's actually making clients happier rather than sadder. So that's important to understand. It's much less warm, but it's much less effective. The second thing that they're doing is starting to map forward. Everyone's really interested in growth now, and we're starting to see that come through the data. The US didn't really blip in the same way we did, but they tolerated a lot more deaths than we did, if that makes sense as well. They didn't really lock down in the way we did. And they had what you would call an economic rationalist approach to the pandemic. There's the famous academic rationalist is a man called Max Weber, who said that every death in today's dollars is worth about $4 million. So unless it's costing you $4 million a death, you should just keep letting them die. But of course, an abstract death is valueless, but a close death is infinitely valuable. So those are the things that are going on. So I feel like I'm reiterating what everyone else has said, but the clear lessons are about process, learning, and working much closer with your partners to get the heavy lifting done.
Andrew, I was hoping that we would have a Roman general or a global leading playwright somewhere in the conversation, and you haven't let us down with Marcus Aurelius and William Shakespeare, so thank you for that. But two things to extend on your discussion, and I'll then head to Katrina on it as well, which is it feels like there's an automation opportunity, and that's what's happening around the market. What are we seeing? But perhaps a bit further on the Roaring Twenties idea, can you explore that a little bit further in terms of what will be the opportunity for advisors, product providers across the world to try and get people to make smart decisions as opposed to just consumer decisions?
So here's the interesting work which is being done mostly in the US, and we're working with two providers in the space over there, which is Vanguard and MFS. So what they're doing now is upping the frequency of communication with their investors, and they're talking they break it up into core, mass affluent, and high net worth. And so core affluent up, they're having conversations about the compounding effect of staying in the market through this process and what that's going to mean to them and the way in which it's going to work. There is a really kind of big communications push at this time. The other thing that I would suggest to you is that the businesses in this state exist in two phases. That is either being born digital or going digital, and making sure that they're working on that. What Richard's really referring to is the US post the First World War, where there was again a lot of stored spending. The Spanish flu came through, as you all know, and wiped out all sorts of people. But that meant there was a massive growth because of what happened with the constriction of employment and the way in which that was returned. Women entered the workforce, so all of a sudden you had two groups earning money. The second thing is that the price of labour shot through the roof because a lot of people had been killed, and they had to employ a lot of people at new wages. And that money didn't sit inside the system. The Roaring Twenties gave us the cocktail, the short skirt, the bob haircut, jazz music, and the automobile, all great things as far as I'm concerned. They're the same, I'm pretty sure, and every economist I speak to thinks that the same thing will happen again. The suppressed spending in Australia is in the hundreds of billions. It's the same is true around the world. As that money moves through the system, there will be consumption, of course. Of course, there's going to be consumption. But if we can turn that to smart consumption, and we can play a role in people making decisions which have a longitudinal benefit, then it's really going to impact not just them, but their families. So that conversation is important, and we're helping some of our clients in the US do that right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. I'm mindful at 4:22. Katrina, I was just going to go to you for that kind of automation question. You pointed to it a little earlier. Is your business kind of really embraced not only Zoom appointments, but everything from client management software to platforms and so on? And how's that looking in your practice?
It's made the job a lot easier. So the first thing I would say, it takes a lot of investment of time and energy to make sure you set them up the way you want them to be, to maintain your personality through it, which is really important. People want me. They want to deal with my team. They don't want to deal with lots of emails and all those kinds of things. They still need to be talking to somebody. They still need some help with it. But there's no way that I want any of my administration team doing anniversary letters. Australia do this better in how they appoint appointments and so forth. Everything we do needs to be more automated, because then it's easy to demonstrate. So the things that I get to do every day, I have gone to 30 odd appointments a week. I'm obviously earning more money as a result of doing that, which is great. But I'm doing that because we're using automation and we're using Zoom, and we're doing things that way. I simply do an appointment. I find out someone's problems. I solve them. I send them an email. I help them understand that email. They make the decisions, and we do the business. We make the adjustments. We stay connected. But the first things that I do is I ask them how they're feeling. How are they coping? What are the things going on in their lives? That hasn't changed. None of that's changed. That's what we always have done. The other stuff is all just part and parcel, and so much easier now, and we can actually do a lot more of it. We invested in a robot. We have a robot in our office that does our anniversary letters now. Makes that job so much more enjoyable. It's a lot easier. It's more. It's actually correct. We don't have errors like we used to. Just that one investment has meant that we've been able to service our clients so much better than what we used to before, and I'm really proud of that. And having that connection with clients has been so important.
Fantastic. Does the robot do the vacuuming as well?
My husband does that. No, I'm only kidding. He's listening to this, so I was only kidding.
I said I did the vacuuming this week.
Good. Can I just say I'm still stuck on your orgy of spending. I'm still stuck on that. And congratulations on 17 kilos. That's amazing. Woo woo.
11 weeks of daily practice and less than 1,000 calories.
I'm 6 weeks and I've put on 5. So obviously I need to listen to you.
Turns out
Nicola,
the process of turning fat into carbon dioxide is well understood, and we all know it. We just don't do it. So,
yeah.
That'll be the subject of our next webinar. I'm just going to close with this one, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists. Sam, I might start with you on this one. Just picking up Nicola's, have you rewarded yourself through COVID, and how do you think we're going to emerge when we emerge? And Sam, I'm mindful you've got your survey open, and you might just want to talk briefly to that in terms of encouraging anyone to participate. So if I can start with you, and then we'll whiz through the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, okay. Look, let me start with some self-promotion first. It'd be rude not to, and that is just talking about the AIA advisor wellness survey. So we kicked that off last week. We've had a tremendous response. This is an independent study with Dr. Adam Fraser and Deakin University. It is similar to the one that we ran in Australia. It's not a long survey, but I would encourage all advisors to participate. We want to have an informed discussion. So it is dealing with what we've talked about today. Working as an advisor in an environment that's changing rapidly, with a lot of external forces. We just want to understand where advisors are at, but more importantly, what do we need to do to help advisors, thrive? And I think, we have touched a lot on that today. My only addition to sort of what we've been talking about with automation is outsourcing. Where we saw in the Australian market where advisors were really thriving was actually knowing what they were good at and what they weren't, and what they weren't good at, looking to outsource. And whether that is relying on manufacturers or relying on your licensee or outsource providers, etc., to provide that service. I think that's a really key one. Not being, it's my business, I've got to control it all. Actually having the faith in outsourcing will make a huge difference. From a personal perspective, I prioritise my own mental health in the sense of coming back to that first, the first point of discussion. If you're not looking after yourself, then how are you actually going to look after your team? How are you going to look after? How are you going to be there for your family and whatever else? For me, similar to Andrew, up early in the morning, get some K's in the legs, get outside, get some fresh air, enjoy that. I've become a much better soccer player. My son is into soccer at the moment, and I've got a pretty firm commitment with the sun lasting a little bit longer. We're down the park at 5 o'clock every night to go and have a kick of the soccer ball. And it's having that religious routine to actually make it happen. And, I don't get that privilege when I'm not at home. And so I'm not losing the opportunity while I am. So seeing it, lockdown, as frustrating as it is, seeing the opportunities that it presents as well. And, for me, it's really managing to bend it like Beckham and curve it into the back corner of the net now after 5.5 weeks of good, solid soccer training on every evening. So how will we come out of it? Look, I hope we come out of it stronger. I agree with Andrew, there's some pent-up demand, but it's really making sure that we spend it wisely and don't just, be wasteful. So time will tell.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sam. Folks, in the last 2 minutes, I might go, Nicola, to you. Have you rewarded yourself, and how will we emerge?
How I rewarded myself. I probably want to finish on a couple of things that I'm quite passionate about, and that's one thing I always say is never complain about something you will tolerate. So when an advisor might be going on about how they hate admin and it's getting them stressed or something, I say, well, you can find really good administrators out there from $250 a week. So don't complain about it. Get someone to help you with it. And it's a good lesson for me too when I'm moaning and groaning about something. I think, well, hang on, how can I actually fix it? The other point that I'd really like to sort of stress, and mainly to women that might be listening, because I do work with a lot of women advisors, is find your joy every day. Actively go and look for it. And I have been doing that now for probably 5 years now. I have literally got up in the morning and my first thoughts are usually I try and find 5 things that I'm really grateful for. And I'm really grateful that I'm actually doing lockdown in my lovely area of Red Beach because I get to look at the view. I'm happy that I've got good health, but every day I can honestly say I look for my joy. And sometimes I get to the end of the day and think, I haven't found my joy yet. So it might be going for a walk. It might be sitting in the bath with a glass of champagne or booking that massage if you're lucky enough not to be in Auckland. But you literally must find that, and when you find it you feel happy within, and when you're happy within, your cup overfloweth and you can actually spread that love and joy to other people that you work, you live with, and your clients, and they will pick up on that. people pick up on whether someone is happy within.
Mm-hmm.
And I once had an advisor say to me, how do you think I can be more successful? And I felt like shaking that advisor and saying, if you focus on improving yourself first, all those other things will flow out, and other people, you will bring joy and love to the clients that you work with. So be real, be true, and be kind actually to yourselves. Be kind to yourself first, and everything overflows. Thanks.
Awesome. Folks, we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask our awesome panelists to be very succinct. I'll only ask you one question. Katrina, have you rewarded yourself over several weeks of lockdown?
When we went to level 3, I rewarded myself every day so far with a walk up to get my coffee with my puppy, and I've loved every minute of it. I've walked with my husband, or I've walked with my daughter, and I'm really enjoying spending time with my babies as well. And my only other comment that I want to say is find a way to fill your soul. Chicken soup for the soul is what you need to do, and if you do that, whatever it is, do more of it. That's what I say.
Fantastic. Riss?
I think similar to Nicola, actually, just the main thing for me is just being kinder to myself, changing the internal dialogue a bit. So, I have the tendency to tell myself I should be doing more, I should be working harder, I should be working out more, I should be doing more. And it's sometimes just taking that step back and going, if I don't do this today, it's okay. We're in a global pandemic, we're in lockdown, just remove those expectations. And I found that it's hard to do, but it's something that helps a lot. So be kinder to yourself.
Awesome. And Andrew, you seem to have rewarded yourself with lots of runs and walks in the morning.
Well, what I've really focused on is a thing called time blocking. I'm not getting pulled into frivolous things, which are mostly is my desire to say yes to my friends to do things. So I'm now being just so, look, I'm busy, I'm sorry, which is, and we'll find another time. And the other thing is, I'll be candid, I got a puppy. I got a rescue Bitzer Clancy of the overflow, but he's quickly become Clancy of the underfoot, because he's just one of those dogs that doesn't leave your feet. And it's lovely, and it changes the whole house because it gives you energy and lots of love and those sorts of things. And I think it's changed the lives of everyone who's in this house, because he's just, it's like having, I don't know if you've seen the show Ted Lasso, it's just like having this highly enthusiastic, always happy to see you every morning at 5 a.m. when I go downstairs and get up to go. He's so delighted to see me at 5 a.m. He's the only house member who is. Everyone else is piss off and leave me alone. But Clancy is, you're up, fantastic news, let's go to the beach. And away we go.
Totally relate. We got one too.
Fantastic. And good to see Australian poetry joining the conversation with Clancy of the Overflow. Folks, 4:33, delightful discussion. Thank you for joining. Hope you're all leaving this discussion with a bit of joy in your soul, whether you're a panelist or a watcher or someone who'll watch it later. It's been absolutely wonderful. So thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and have an awesome rest of the afternoon with your dogs, your partners, and your robots. See you, folks. Bye.